Right now on WHAS 11 Plus, it's a guilty verdict, and then the judge throws the book at Brooks Houck with the recommended sentence of life in prison. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Doug Prophet, WHAS 11 News. Plus, huge crowds turn out in Bardstown, Kentucky to celebrate the verdict hours later in the Crystal Rogers case. You will see that ahead. But for the next 30 minutes, we're going to bring you everything you need to know about the jury's big decision today, and it came with lightning speed. The jury finding Brooks Houck, all along the chief murder suspect in this case, guilty of murder, being a principal or accomplice in that murder, and guilty of tampering with physical evidence. The jury saying they thought Brooks Houck was involved, but could not tell based off evidence if he was the culprit or just an accomplice. Then there's Joseph Lawson, who was on trial with Brooks Houck, one of the alleged accomplices in this case, also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of tampering with physical evidence, the same as his father, Steve Lawson, just weeks ago. We want to begin our coverage now from Bowling Green, Kentucky, where the trial was held with Shay McAllister and Alexandra Goldberg. And Shay, I know you want to explain how the day played out. It moved so fast. You were there for both the verdict and then that sentencing recommendation.
Absolutely, Doug. It did go fast. So let's start at the top. The jurors had two questions after heading to the deliberation room around 8:36, would you say? It started at 8:30, and they were back deliberating within just a few minutes. So the two questions they had, number one, about 2 hours into deliberations, they asked for a whiteboard, and then they wanted to be able to watch videos. And then that second question, they wanted to watch a specific piece of testimony.
Right, that testimony about Charlie Girdley. So they all came back into the courtroom. They played just a couple minutes of that Charlie Girdley testimony. Those first few minutes, what seemed to be just enough to get those statements about conversations with Rosemary, and of course that statement that he would pull the teeth and let the hogs do the rest.
Yeah, they only 10 minutes, and they handed a note to the judge saying, that's it, we've heard enough. Back to the deliberation room for another 3 hours or so right there. When they came back into the room, tension was thick in the courtroom all around. I was sitting right in front of the Ballard family. They were all holding hands side by side in the row right behind me. They were shaking. They had their tissues in their hands. You could tell they were nervous, they were anxious, and they were leaning on each other. You, of course, were on the other side of the courtroom.
Yeah, and Shay, even when I was walking into the courtroom and I took my seat, remember, I've been sitting right behind Brooks Houck this entire trial. We even made a little bit of eye contact, and it was the first time I could really notice this nervous look in his eyes. He seemed to have some sort of different emotion that we hadn't seen throughout the trial. It's what I observed right off the bat.
And his family, very stoic, not reacting in any way, not holding hands, not crying or anything like that. Of course, once that verdict was read, and it was the very first thing the judge read, was the guilty of murder verdict. Principal or accomplice, meaning the jury wasn't able to figure out, did he kill her or was he just part of it?
Right.
But it's a murder charge with a murder-sized penalty all the same. And that's when I noticed the Ballard family starting to sob. I mean, loud, audible sobs. And the judge and the bailiffs had warned against any outbursts, saying any outbursts, you'll be kicked out of this courtroom. But sobbing uncontrollably.
Absolutely. It was audible from the courtroom. And on the side of the defense, as you said, Brooks' family was very stoic. Once the verdict came down, I turned around and I looked to see who was reacting, and you could see Rosemary and Rhonda McElvoy, just straight face. They weren't reacting in the courtroom at all, but of course there was some teary eyes on that side. People wiping their eyes with tissues, also reacting. But
and what about Brooks? Did you notice anything from Brooks?
No, I didn't. Of course, I'm only seeing the back of his head. The only thing that really stood out to me was that concerned look on his face before the verdict was read.
Doug, so that is all when the verdict comes down. Of course, after this, there's a break before we get to the sentencing phase.
Actually, just going back through the text messages that you sent me today, and at 12:39 you texted, the jury is getting lunch delivered to the deliberation room, and then here comes 1:35 p.m. We have a verdict. Were people scrambling to get back into the courtroom? You know, we've been playing the video, the incredible video, the emotional scene of Till Ballard, the father of Tommy Ballard, who was also mysteriously shot and killed, the man who led the search for Crystal.
Oh yeah, as soon as we heard a verdict, I would say it kind of trickled back from the courtroom back to the rotunda where we were sitting.
Yeah.
And as soon as we heard verdict, everybody was on their feet getting into that room as quickly as possible. People were very eager to hear what had happened there.
Absolutely, scrambling towards those courtroom doors. And as we've been mentioning, there was a feeling of anxiety. People had this pent-up energy just waiting to see what happened. Of course, this decision deciding the fate of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson.
Doug?
So we all wondered about this case because it was so circumstantial, and we'd seen years and years of those massive FBI searches bringing out phone records and evidence like that.
Wait,
you heard the speculation probably in the hallways before the verdict came out. Did anybody correctly call that this was the verdict we were going to have?
I didn't hear anyone speculating one way or another. I feel like everyone was way too nervous to go one way or another. What I heard in those minutes before were people saying, we're praying, we're hoping, we're praying, we're hoping. I didn't hear any actual speculation. I know when it came to the penalty phase, people were really hoping to hear life in prison. But before they heard that, there was all of this testimony, Doug, and it's almost like a mini trial. So Crystal's daughter takes the stand, Kylie Fenwick. She says it's been very hard for the last 10 years. We've waited a long time for this. She asked the jurors to do what's in their heart, but to be fair. Steve Shoring, Brooks Houck's attorney, stood up and said, we respect your verdict, but we see the facts differently in this case. He said, no matter what happens, Brooks Houck is going to prison for a long, long time. And with no criminal history before or after this incident, this case is very different for most. He was trying to get them to be more lenient on Brooks Houck. He was asking that they take into consideration that this is the only thing in his criminal record. But Shane Young threw that out the window. He said it doesn't matter that he hasn't done anything before or after. He's killed someone. He has taken someone from their family, and that is enough. Shane Young had some really strong quotes here saying, they were so close to this being perfect, being unsolvable, but they made a mistake when that car got a flat tire. He called it premeditated murder, saying they planned to kill her, to get rid of her, and to make it look like she just left. He said, we believe the plan started in May when Mama Houck, and he pointed to Rosemary Houck right there, asked for someone to get rid of her. Shane Young was ultimately the one who led the jury on this direction, saying, I am asking for a life sentence. I'm asking for you to render some justice, justice for the Ballard family. They have been waiting a long time. And it seems that that message resonated with the jurors because they were back in that deliberation room for mere minutes.
Just minutes.
Before coming back out and then handing over their penalty sentence, maximum recommendations for both of the men. Joseph Lawson, 20 years on conspiracy, 5 years on tampering. For Brooks Houck, life in prison for murder, 5 years for tampering with physical evidence. They also wanted these to run consecutively, meaning they couldn't serve them at the same time, which is almost the jurors sending a message that they want as much time as possible served for these crimes, which was what the family was hoping for. I will say the one response I noticed from the Houck family of the entire proceeding was the moment the judge read life in prison. Rosemary got up and started to walk out, and the bailiffs were kind of on edge, and she walked right by them, eager to exit the room.
Right.
Doug?
Shay, you mentioned justice for Crystal Rogers, of course, justice for Sherry Ballard. You know Sherry Ballard better than any other reporter out there. Can you describe her day today, this morning, as it started? And I know you were able to at least walk alongside her as she was heading to her car to head back to Bardstown this afternoon.
Well, Doug, when I talked to Sherry this morning before court, she told me she was wearing green for Tommy, pink for Crystal, and she felt them both there with her. She told me nothing but good thoughts, nothing but positive thoughts, and she was going to hold that positive energy until the very, very end. On her way to the car, tears in her eyes still, but happy and relieved. This has been such a long 10 years for her. She has carried the torch, this fight for her family, alone for a lot of the last few years after losing Tommy. And I think for her, this is a weight lifted like we just can't imagine.
Well, do you expect her to make a comment or maybe wait until after the final sentencing?
You know, she's been asked by the prosecutor not to give any interviews over the last 2.5-ish years. I would imagine she'll respect that through the sentencing. I think at this point, she's not willing to risk anything. She doesn't want to mess up anything.
And then, I don't know if you've been able to see in the video, the incredible scene in Bardstown, Kentucky, those people rallying by the dozens around the courthouse square. Shay and Alexandra, I just want to get your all's thoughts to that, because we now have this heavy weight of 10 years lifting somewhat, although their theme at that square was, it's not over yet.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've heard over and over again throughout the trial is praying for Crystal. We saw that message on those signs in Bardstown. Even as the verdict was read today, I heard someone from the Ballard family say, "Thank you, Jesus." People are praying, people were praying, and people thought their prayers were heard today.
I think for this case, it's so personal to the small community of Bardstown. It's personal to the Ballard family, but there have been thousands of people who have helped search for Crystal, who have gone to rallies, who have attended court cases, who have even just shared graphics and flyers on social media, that for so many people in the small community of Bardstown, this feels like a win for them. Even if they don't know Sherry or Tommy or Crystal personally, this feels like their victory as well. And it certainly gives them this fresh start. America's most beautiful small town, haunted by this for a decade. This is a huge weight lifted for them. So, Alex, after court, we ran outside of the courthouse, and while most of the Ballard family wanted to leave, Ashley, Crystal's oldest daughter, did agree to talk to us a little bit, and we asked her what the last 2 weeks have been like. What was it like hearing that verdict come down today?
Like a sign of relief. We've been waiting 10 long years for this.
And when you heard guilty, is that what you were expecting?
Yeah. It's what we hoped and prayed for, and hearing what the jury had asked about while they were deliberating.
What were the hardest days of this trial? What were the hardest moments to sit through?
All of it, really.
Is there anything that stands out that you were like, that was a moment that really shook us?
Yeah. When they were talking about the pigs, that really hurt, really bad.
And what was it like to be in the same room as Brooks Houck? I know it's been a long time since you guys have been that close to him.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years since I've been around him, so it was, you could feel the energy in the room, that's for sure.
To hear that he's getting life in prison, that's the jury recommendation.
Yes.
What was that feeling to hear that recommendation from the jury?
Relief. Really. My kids get to grow up without their grandma in their life, so it's really hard.
Ashley, you've heard other Houck family member names brought up continuing the trial. What are your thoughts about bringing up Rosemary and Nick Houck?
I think Rosemary and Nick had something to do with it, and I think that will all come out within time.
Does today give a sense of closure?
Somewhat. I would still wish we would be able to lay her to rest the way she needs to be.
Do you think that will ever happen?
In time, yeah. I do hope that it will happen.
Now that he's been convicted, would you like him to admit his guilt and say, this is what
Yeah,
happened?
that would be very relieving for me and our family.
It has been a long time coming, and for her to say that about Tommy Ballard, that this is finishing his mission, I think that's just very, very powerful, and a little bit of how everyone's feeling today.
Absolutely. That sense of relief is much needed for the Ballard family.
Yeah. So, Doug, of course, we still have official sentencing. That life in prison is just a recommendation by the jury. Ultimately, it will be the judge on August 21st to hand down the official sentencing.
All right, thank you both for your excellent coverage of the past 2 weeks. And by the way, late this afternoon, the FBI Louisville put out a statement. They took over this case in 2020, and in a post on social media this afternoon, of course, you saw them conducting those searches of the Houck farm and other properties over the years that we brought you here on WHAS 11 News. The agency said after 5 years of work, quote, "We are proud of the pivotal role we played in seeking justice for Crystal Rogers and her family," adding, We hope this outcome brings some semblance of peace to Crystal's family and the larger Bardstown community. That's the FBI Louisville with that statement late this afternoon. Well, WHAS 11's legal analyst is Nick Mudd, Louisville attorney of the Mudd Law Group. He's a defense attorney now, but has served as a prosecutor in the Violent Crimes Division right here in Louisville. Nick, you know all of the players here. You've been, as far as the legal representation, you know the prosecution side, you know the defense attorneys. You've been texting them, you've been talking to them. What are they saying about this decision, the guilty verdict for Brooks Houck, and then that sentencing? We're going to talk about that. What are they saying to you?
Certainly, I talked to Jim Lasowski and Shane Young via text. Shane, is just happy to get justice for the Ballard family. He said, I hope they can get some sort of closure. Did speak with Robert Boyd a little bit. He's very disappointed. He still believes his client, Joseph Lawson, is innocent. He's adamant about that and continuing to fight. And I know I briefly spoke with Brian Butler, who's pretty upset. He gave it his best. It was not the outcome they were looking for or expecting today, but certainly, he is upset, and I think that everybody in the whole case, though, it sounds like they're all just tired. It's been a long journey. This case has been going on for quite some time, over how many months? Almost 2 years, it feels like. And I think the past 2 weeks, those attorneys from both sides have just been hammering away on it. 200,000 pages of discovery, 200 hours of interviews, so much to keep in your head as an attorney, as either whether you're defending or you're prosecuting.
And yet a circumstantial case.
And a circumstantial
even with
case
all that
got,
evidence.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about the speed of the jury today.
Right.
They go to lunch at about 12:30. They come out with a verdict at 1:30. Pretty much of a slam dunk for the prosecution in this case. So would you view it that way in the end?
If you're talking about how quick the verdict, or you mean what the result
the
was?
results.
Well, when they came back that quick, I walked in and I told you they're in trouble, and you said, what do you mean? And I said, the defense is in big trouble because it was a circumstantial case. It only took them really less than 4 hours, Doug, because they had lunch, they're sitting around, and they came back, and this is a co-defendant case. We're not talking about one person. We're talking about two separate people with two separate, distinct jury instructions. And once they came back that quick, I knew they were in trouble, and then they were out on penalty, Doug, 20 minutes.
So the jury did have some activity today before they took the lunch break. They wanted to see a clip, a video clip of Charlie Girdley, a witness who they poked many holes in him and said he was unreliable anyway, but he gets on the stand and he gave that very gruesome testimony that he related it to Joseph Lawson, saying Joseph Lawson was going to use a skid steer to bury Crystal Rogers, and Joseph Lawson talked about the teeth, and then the hogs would do the rest. Do you think they put a lot of credibility in Charlie Girdley, despite what we were seeing play out in that courtroom?
We had almost 40 witnesses, and they picked to watch testimony of one, just one. And they did so, all they wanted to see was his direct testimony, to where I think he made that statement of, I would pull her teeth and the hogs would do the rest, which when we heard it, I remember we were all shocked. Just initially, a couple weeks ago when we heard it, it was disgusting, appalling, and upsetting, and that's the statement they wanted to watch. And I do wonder if they went back and watched the tape, if they wanted to look at his face, look at his demeanor, look how he was acting. They saw it in court, but, obviously it's been a couple weeks that people forget things, and they wanted to go back, and they saw that, and I think a verdict came pretty shortly after that.
They even asked Girdley when he was on the stand, is this the truth?
Right. Shane Young ended, there was a blazing cross-examination from the defense, from both attorneys. Very long cross-examination. And, it was very contentious. And I know Robert Boyd, he had his shot, and he said, now you're telling your sick story. And then Girdley, on redirect, when Shane Young got up and asked him again, is this a truth? And Girdley looked at the jury and said, absolutely.
And then the irrefutable evidence in this case is that it proved Brooks Houck was the last person to be with Crystal Rogers. That's the cell phone evidence. Let's go back to that night.
Yeah.
It was the 3rd of July, starting at 7:30 p.m.
And she, we know she was on her phone until 9:24 p.m. The phone's powered down. I think it ran out of battery, and then it's powered up again around midnight. But the thing is that Jim Lasowski for the prosecution told the jury in opening statement, don't leave your God-given common sense at the door. That's what we're going to ask you to use in this case more than anything else. And he alluded to the fact of, look, the records will show there is one person who Crystal was with when she went missing, and that one person is Brooks Houck sitting in the courtroom today. And the jury bought it, they put it together, and they, you know, certainly they sat through a lot of testimony. It was a circumstantial case, but at the end of the day, that's who she was with. And really, the defense never disputed that that's the person she was with last, because that was the facts. I mean, that was indisputable. You couldn't dispute it. I mean, everyone agreed to it. And so I think that may have been one of the biggest keys, is just that common sense thought. It's like, okay, you're the last person you were with, and then everything was built around that.
Well, even Brian Butler said it. It seemed to be a powerful line at the time, but it's still a metaphor for this case. No body, no weapon, no motive.
No physical evidence.
No crime scene.
Yeah.
No evidence. We still really don't know what happened to Crystal Rogers despite this verdict.
We have no idea where her body is. We have no idea how she was killed. We don't really know why she was killed, Doug. We heard the prosecution allude to it in an opening statement, but really there wasn't much proof given in terms of a motive as the case developed. And we thought we would get that, and we didn't. But, I mean, Shane Young made a point. And remember, we go all the way back to jury selection, Doug, 2.5 weeks ago. He hit on the fact of, if there's not a body, can you convict? And I believe it was several jurors raised their hand and said no, and all those jurors were struck.
Yeah, you said the biggest mistake Brooks Houck ever made was going into that police interview with Jon Snow.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it was the 7th or 8th of July.
Absolutely. I think that was a big misstep. Obviously, you know, any attorney would have advised him, do not go speak with law enforcement without an attorney present, or potentially don't speak with law enforcement at all. But he did, and then Shane Young was able to go through and call witness after witness to dispute that. Now, I will tell you, there was another thing that I think is important that we didn't really get to hear. Some of it was put on the screen, involving secret recordings between Brooks Houck and Rosemary Houck. And my understanding is a lot of those were pretty damning to both Brooks Houck and Rosemary, and made them sound very, very guilty. I think there was a mention by Rosemary Houck of, what about the blanket? And Brooks Houck responded something of, oh, don't worry about that, I took care of it. And so that's the kind of stuff that jurors hang on. And remember, these are recordings. Some of those recordings the jury heard are things that they didn't know. The Houcks didn't know the recordings were on. They accidentally clicked them on.
The unindicted co-conspirators, that's Rosemary Houck, the mother of Brooks Houck and Nick Houck being the other unindicted co-conspirator. Nick Mudd and I are going to talk about them a little later before we wrap up this broadcast. But first, I want to take you to Bardstown, Kentucky. You know, this has been a closely watched trial and a murder mystery, captivating Bardstown for 10 years. Our Isaiah Kim Martinez and senior photojournalist Alyssa Newton are there as they watch the crowd grow for the rally for Sherry Ballard.
Here in Bardstown, there is a ray of sunshine. That is how it was described to me for dozens, hundreds of people here in the Bardstown community reacting to the verdict, the guilty verdicts of both Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson. These families here today, these individuals gathered in pink with signs to show support for the Ballard family as they made their way home, and we got to see it with our own eyes. Sherry Ballard, other members of the family, tears in their eyes with tissues wiping away tears as they were escorted by police, driving their cars through, to seeing just tons of cheers and folks showing their support for that family on such a momentous day, 10 years in the making. I want to bring in one of those people who was showing support here today in Bardstown. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Karen Cecil.
And you lived in Bardstown for how long?
I've been here about 30 years. Yeah, so to me, this is my home now, and I hope that Sherry and her family realize how much we care for them, support them, and we're here for them. And I hope they know that we're going to support them all the way to the end, because it's not over.
I'm going to bring you into the center here as well. I noticed that your shirt said the beginning of justice. I sort of saw this whole rally of sorts sort of had two messages. It was justice served, right? There was celebration for that. Right. But at the same time, remember, this is just the start. Can you explain?
Absolutely right. That's because there is more justice to come. We have to get the other participants in this, because it's not over till it's over. And I hope they know that it will come to an end and they will get caught. Yeah.
I've had different people tell me here, Rosemary Houck, Nick Houck, those are the two that people still have on their mind.
Yes, that's the main two. I think that I'm sure there's more that we are not aware of, but those two for sure, big hand in it. I hope that the smirks that they've had on their face from the beginning of this, living their life in Bardstown, in the town that Sherry lived in and raised her kids in, I hope that, you know, that they know that they can't come back here ever in their whole life. I hope they're not able to, but I hope they know how this town feels, and we're behind the Ballards 100%.
You guys started here by the old courthouse at 5 o'clock, and the crowd just ballooned. What was it like for you to know that the actual Ballard family got to see you guys? It wasn't on video, they got to see with their own eyes driving home.
Yeah, I hope that they have known all along that, and I feel like they have known that we're supporting them and we love them, and I hope they feel that always. But I mean, it's been an emotional day altogether, but it was hard. It was hard, and this is just a joyous moment. And as you can tell,
there are still people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I'm sure a weight has been lifted off of their family, but like I said, it's not over.
Were there any nerves or doubts that this was going to be the result of today, or did you not let your mind go there?
Actually, you know, you don't get to hear everything that goes on, so naturally you do get a little nervous about it, wondering how the jury is going to see things, but and of course, in our eyes, people that know what's going on, what's happened, there's no way they could have found him anything but guilty. I mean, that had to be the verdict, because it's justice, because we knew he was guilty.
Thank you so much for taking the time. You've been very patient with us and talking to us a bunch, and just thank you for letting us be here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for coming and doing everything you do for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Take care.
You too.
And what we're seeing right now, right, I want to just take a moment. This about an hour ago, or actually by the time you're going to see this stream would have been a couple hours, it was absolutely packed. Actually, if you want to follow along with me, this entire sort of storefront section was just filled with people. Now there's been some time. Obviously, the Ballard family came through, they came and went, but it was something, again, that this city, this community was waiting a long time for, 10 years for, and they believe there's more to come. There are more charges to be filed, there are more indictments to be made, and more juries to have to make decisions. We'll see if that happens, how long that happens, but the community here is confident, and they're taking what they believe and what they say was a win today for the family and the city overall. I'm here in Bardstown, Isaiah Kim Martinez, WHAS 11 on your side.
Again, the theme of that rally was "It's not over yet." And Nick, so they're most likely referencing the unindicted co-conspirators here, Rosemary Houck, who was in the courtroom earlier today, and Brooks Houck's brother, Nick Houck, a former Bardstown police officer before he was fired by the chief there, Rick McCubbin. What could potentially these two face down the road, and how quickly would they face anything? Like, what are we talking about here?
That's a good question. And, you know, we still don't have the evidence or the discovery in the case. We know what was presented in court, but we as outsiders, it's been sealed, that 200 plus hours of video, the, 200,000 pages of discovery. We haven't been able to look at that at all. So we don't know what's in there that references them. I'm going to assume, based on speaking with people close to the case, there is a decent amount in there. A lot of it's been redacted out, referencing them though. Well, that's where it's blacked out and you can't see, referencing certain people. That being said, the prosecution was open and adamant that Rosemary and Nick Houck were involved in this. And certainly we heard about Nick Houck's phone being turned off the entirety of July 3rd and July 4th. We heard from his ex-girlfriend who said, look, he said he was cleaning our new house. That house hadn't been touched. We heard about Rosemary Houck's opinion of Crystal, et cetera. So we heard about a lot of different things. We heard about the white Buick owned by the Houck grandmother, and I think Nick Houck then goes and sells it. But remember, Shane Young said at a bond hearing, however many, 20-something months ago, that, Nick Houck was involved in the potential sale of the gun that killed Tommy Ballard. And so it makes me wonder what's coming next. And it would not surprise me if charges do follow.
So Bardstown has always believed these mysteries are connected. Going back to Bardstown police officer Jason Ellis, killed on a holiday as he was heading home on the ramp there. And then comes Tommy Ballard, shot and killed as he was getting ready to do a little hunting trip in November. We don't know really the strength of that connection, but I remember when Rick Sanders was the head of Kentucky State Police, he's now the J-Town police chief, he told us in an interview that if he believed that one day, one arrest, and of course we hadn't had any arrests yet, could possibly connect everything else.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening?
Well, I mean, like I said, in this case, through the entirety of it and through this trial, we've heard those connections. The question is, what is the strength of the evidence in those cases versus Rosemary Houck versus Nick Houck? We don't know the answer. That's the question that I have. Is the strength, is it enough for them to go forward and push, get a grand jury indictment, and ultimately prosecute these individuals?
Some final questions for you. Okay, we've got the sentencing coming up.
Right.
That's going to be on Thursday, August 21st for the sentencing. We really haven't talked about the sentencing much. The life sentence is a recommended sentence from the jury. This is when the judge will decide. What do you think Judge Charles Sims does in this case?
I don't bet, Doug. If I was a betting man, I would bet everything I own that he is going to follow that recommendation without question. Without question. I've seen a judge twice in jury cases that I've had go lower than a recommendation. It's not going to happen here. I'm telling you, there's no way. Absolutely not.
Does Brooks Houck really spend life in prison?
He is eligible for parole after serving 20 years, okay, minus the time he's got in, so 18 and some change. That being said, that's no guarantee that you're going to be paroled out. He very likely could spend life in prison or get, paroled out when he's a very old man.
Do both of them stay in jail for right now, or could they have a chance of getting out?
Well, that technically can post a bond and appeal. Like a bond is still set because they haven't been sentenced. Highly unlikely. Sometimes courts have allowed people to post what's called an appeal bond. Hey, while your case is appealing, you can post $1 million, $10 million, whatever it may be, some astronomical number. That's unlikely to happen here. I would say the chances are about 0%.
Where do you think they're going to be housed once they are sentenced finally?
Most likely, so the way that it usually happens in the state of Kentucky is once they're sentenced, they'll go out to what's called Roederer, which is a classification facility.
Oldham County.
Out in Oldham County, that's correct. And then usually they do an assessment, your risk assessment based on your prior criminal history, drug use, what you need, your I guess, personal needs, mental health, things of that nature. And then you were classified and sent somewhere. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Brooks Houck got sent to somewhere like Eddyville, which is more of a higher security prison.
The main prison in Kentucky, along with Kentucky State Reformatory.
Right.
Well, what about Joseph Lawson? You were telling me earlier today, before it came out, you thought Brooks Houck would be convicted of murder. Joseph Lawson, you felt, would be not convicted, that he would not face charges in the end. You thought he'd be found not guilty. What was the key to the jury convicting Joseph Lawson?
Yeah, it had to be the statement from Charlie Girdley. I mean, I can't think of anything else. I really don't know what else they had that I saw that strongly tied Joseph Lawson to this. And that statement seems to be the fact that the jury watched it again and they only wanted to see that direct testimony that dealt just with Joseph Lawson is very, very telling, and especially they came with a verdict shortly thereafter.
The win of the day goes to the prosecution. What was their best evidence?
Oh, I don't think the win of the day. I mean, Doug, this is
the landslide
life
of the
in
day.
prison.
Yes.
Is a blitzkrieg. It is a, it's a 100-0 win at the end of the day when you get that. It just does not happen in homicides that often.
Their best evidence?
The best evidence from the prosecution. I think the best evidence was arguing common sense. And I said his statement, and I know I said that was the nail in the coffin, and I said the phone records I've been talking about for over a year. You've had me just pound that home, and I said that was what's going to convict him. But at the end of the day, the common sense dictates that he was with her that night. He had plans with her that night. And then suddenly she goes missing in the time window he's supposed to be with her, and the next day he gives an interview like, I don't know where she is. I don't know. I mean, I think, again, that's circumstantial evidence. It's not a smoking gun that we all want, like a confession or DNA, but it's strong. And I think you can't discount common sense regarding circumstances when you deal with a case, because common sense is going to dictate, and then they filled in the gaps when they brought all the other circumstantial evidence.
I would love it if the jurors would talk about their decision making. Sometimes they do in cases, many times they don't, because we all saw this play out, and a lot of the people who watch our broadcasts and comment thought the same thing, that we expected this hefty rollout of evidence after 10 years of searching. We saw the massive FBI searches on the Houck farm and then the other property, finding the driveway material and hauling out sheaths of paperwork and computers and cell phones and that. And yet this case turns out to be circumstantial.
You know, I will say though, and again, we weren't able to hear them, but my understanding is those recordings from Brooks Houck and Rosemary Houck talking, and they didn't know the recorders were on, my understanding, were very impactful to the jury.
As we wrap this up, Nick, do you see any issues that cropped up that could be good for appeal, or at least an argument for appeal in this case?
I told you, Doug, I was concerned about that third instruction. Not the murder, intentional murder, not the complicity to commit murder, but the third instruction that dealt with a principal or accomplice. I've never seen it in a murder case. I've tried dozens of homicides on both sides. I've never had it, never dealt with it. And it's one of those things that I'm not familiar with, but it read very awkwardly, and I am concerned that that could be the one appeal. And I will tell you, Doug, in my experience of cases that get overturned on appeal, 50% or so of those, give or take, deal primarily with jury instructions being wrong.
All right. Nick Mudd, thank you for your expert analysis, both looking at the defense side and the prosecution side. Prosecution side as well. The trial of the decade in Kentucky is now over. The verdicts are in. Guilty. Sentencing is set for Thursday, August 21st, back in Nelson County, and we will bring you full coverage of that on the air and online. We thank you very much for watching our special broadcast here on WHAS 11+. For now, I'm Doug Proffitt. Good night.